The Battle of Goose Green, 28th of May, continuing for about 40 hours, 1982 in the Falklands, of course. As we know, we'd made a landing on the Bay of San Carlos a couple of weeks before that, taken some heavy losses in ships and so on. And Two Para had been embedded up on the mountains a little way in, just providing cover, so all of the logistics and everything you need was being taken off the boats, and they were there in case there was an Argentinian counterattack. I mean, as we know from studying the World Wars, the Germans, there's one thing you can count on with a German: they will counterattack every time. But not the Argentinians. No, they didn't. But these troops have been there embedded for like a couple of weeks, literally kind of out in the open on these windswept hills. And I was reading about it, and what they were doing there, in terms of water, it's kind of marshy, swampy, dirty soil. You can sort of put a cup into the ground. The water table is very high. You can fill it with water, and then you put in your sort of chlorine tablet or whatever, your sterilisation tablet, and you can drink it. But there are many causes of diarrhea. It's not just bacteria. It's different changes in osmosis, different chemicals, all sorts of things. This is why even if you drink pure water and you're on holiday, you can very easily get diarrhea. And they were suffering. I read accounts of some of them going into battle, literally, like we used to hear in Gallipoli and stuff in the First World War. They were going into battle literally having torn holes in their trousers because they had such bad diarrhea. And, you know, it's pretty gross. But anyway, so we come to the Battle of Goose Green. Totally unnecessary battle. Could have just left some troops there to guide. It's kind of an isthmus, Goose Green. It's going down south on the islands of East Falklands. Stanley's way over to the east. That's the capital. That's where the Argentinian commander is. That's where the bulk of the troops are, etc. Could have just cut off the isthmus, stationed some men there, and they would have surrendered. Stanley was the goal, and Julian Thompson, the commander, knew that. But there was pressure from London for some action to take place, and I think this was due to diplomacy. What they wanted was action, because otherwise there was a danger that diplomacy could lead to truces and ceasefires. And the problem was that the British task force could not stay in the South Atlantic for too much longer, really. Hermes and Invincible, the aircraft carriers, were already getting battered by the waves, as were the smaller ships. And there was a limit to how long they could stay there. And so things couldn't be delayed. They needed action. And this is why it was done. But even so, it was a totally unnecessary battle. But moving on to battle, it was a nighttime attack. As I say, 28th night or early morning, sort of 28th of May. Two Para, moving southward, come up to, I think it was something like 17 trenches across the isthmus, very interlocked. The Argentinians had dug their trenches well, and they knew well the lessons of the First World War, as I've spoken about before, enfilading fire. Yeah. The idea that you don't fire straight at an enemy, you crisscross sideways. It's far better. And they have many interlocking fields of machine gun fire with all of these layers of trenches. And also, they had quite a bit of artillery support, whereas Two Para only had three 105mm guns, so very little artillery. And this was one of the problems. I mean, the artillery is referred to as the queen of the battlefield. And there's a reason for that. 60% of casualties in World War I were caused by artillery, even though we think of gas and machine guns. No, artillery is the thing. And so, moving southward into the battle, things start to get held up. Casualties are being taken. Overall, as I'll say, 63, I believe, British suffered injuries. 18 were killed. In the centre, B Company gets really stuck. They just can't move forward. They're pinned down, and they're taking casualties because they're also under artillery bombardment. It gets so slowed down, daylight is coming. And by this point, Goose Green and Darwin, those two settlements, should have been taken by now. We didn't want daylight. In the Falklands, the whole campaign was fought with nighttime engagements. One of the reasons being, well, two reasons really. Firstly, our soldiers were better trained and could fight at night, whereas most of the Argentinians were conscripts. And secondly, the Argentinians had overwhelming air power, although our 20 or so Sea Harriers did a great job. They were vastly outnumbered at 10 to 1 by the Argentinian Air Force. And so they couldn't provide aerial superiority or aerial supremacy. So daylight was coming, and we started getting raided by Argentinian planes. They were dropping napalm, they were dropping cluster bombs, things like this. The Harriers did come in, or at least one did, and I forget, I think we did actually have napalm. A little known fact, by the way, we also had nuclear weapons there, which not many people know about. We actually did have nuclear weapons on that mission in case things went really south. There was a thought, actually, of nuking the main airport at Stanley. But instead we went with the Black Buck raids to crater the runway using the Vulcan bombers. But I think the naval commander, whose name I forget, Stanley Woodward, I think, wasn't it? Sandy Woodward. I think he would like to have just nuked it, to be honest, for the safety of his ships, with just a little nuclear device. But anyway, that's a digression. So planes are coming in, bombing, cluster bombing, napalming, all this stuff. We're retaliating, the odd airstrike as well. But things are being badly held up, and we're in trouble. Lieutenant Colonel Herbert Jones, Colonel H. Jones is what everybody calls him. He's the commander of 2 Para. He goes to the front. He shouldn't have been there. It was not his job to be there. It was his job to command from the back. That was his job. We criticise World War I generals saying, well, they're in their chateaus behind the lines, which actually is nonsense. But I forget now. I think it was dozens, if not hundreds, of our generals were actually killed in World War I. But that's another story again. But anyway, but the job of a general is to command the battle. It's not to be on the front line charging enemy trenches. You're far more valuable behind the lines orchestrating the battle. But anyway, H. Jones gets to the front, takes fire actually just getting there because, this is an advanced position and it's still under artillery and machine gun fire from the slopes above. He gets there, reconnoitres it, has a little look, and he decides that he needs action. And unfortunately, for his family and everything, he was a man of action, and he was what we call, he's not a peacetime soldier, he's a wartime soldier. He's wed his life for this chance. This is his chance. He wants to get into action. So he immediately, having assessed the situation, he sees a trench, and this is the tragedy actually, the trench he charges, they had no ammo left. They couldn't even fire. He was charging a trench that had Argentinian soldiers in it, but they had run out of ammunition, at least according to, their accounts afterwards. So, but anyway, charges up the hill toward the trench. Someone from behind shouts, "Down, get down!" Because there's an enfilading trench, there's interlocking fields of fire. There's a trench on the left where a soldier, or more probably more than one soldier, but there's only one with a mag, Belgium general purpose machine gun, can enfilade him. And he starts firing. And his buddy, H. Jones, is kind of his man at his right hand side. He hasn't charged out the trench. He's more sensible than that. He shouts to his commander, "Get down!" H. Jones ignores him. He says maybe he didn't hear him, but he says, "No, I think actually he just ignored me." Jones carries on charging. The machine guns start chewing up the ground just behind him, and then chew him up from behind. The bullets spin into the ground, then start hitting him. He goes down, manages to get up, makes another little charge. He's trying to find a hand grenade at this point, according to the Argentinian who fired the machine gun. And then he's hit again, and down he goes. Shortly afterward, they do attack again. And in fact, the Argentinians surrender. And the Argentinian soldier that actually had shot H. Jones, according to him, and now again, I have no idea if this is true, but this is what he said. He said the troops beat him up when they found him, put him on his front, tied his hands behind his back, as you do in the military, I suppose. I know, they use cable ties in 82? Don't know, probably. But yeah, and apparently gave him a good kicking. They didn't kill him. And that's what happened. Of course, the call goes out on the radio, sunray is down, which is just a general term for the commanding officer is down. Back at base, back at battalion headquarters, we have Major Chris Keeble, okay? And he hears this, and he just can't believe it. How the hell does our commander just get killed? He says over the radio, "Could you verify?" Gets the message back, "Sunray is down, for Christ's sake." It's verified. Jones is down. Keeble takes charge, goes and assesses the situation, has a little look at it, and frankly did a much better job than Jones was doing. Rather than Jones getting caught up in the minutiae of trying to fight through 17 trenches, he immediately sends out reconnaissance patrols. They see that actually you can slip around the side of these trenches right by the coast. So you're really careful, just get down below the cliffs. You can slip around them. And so he sends a company out to slip around, I suppose it'd be the westward side. And they're able to take them from behind, flank them. And soon Goose Green and Darwin are surrounded. At this point, though, they're still vastly outnumbered. There's well over 1,000 Argentinians there against several hundred British. And this is the masterstroke. Out on the radio, Keeble calls for a truce. And then he sends back a few, or maybe, I don't know, probably two actually, Argentinian soldiers with a letter that they'd written in Spanish. They had a translator under a white flag, a truce, with a message. And it basically read something like this: "To power are the best soldiers in the world. You're surrounded. There's no hope of escape. However, if you surrender now, you'll be treated well. But if you resist, we won't take the town. We will bombard you with artillery, and any civilian casualties that might be sustained, we will hold you all responsible." So basically saying, you won't be treated as prisoners of war if we have to bombard the town. No, you'll be treated as war criminals because you're sheltering, using civilians for shelter, which is effectively what they were actually doing. Whereupon they surrender, and there's a great video of just hundreds of Argentinians dumping down this vast quantity of weapons and everything. So all in all, looking back at it, the Argentinians suffered maybe 60 dead or so, and I'd say well over 1,000 surrendered. H. Jones won a Victoria Cross for that. Was it well deserved? Many people think that he shouldn't have been there. It wasn't his job to do it. However, it was a great act of gallantry. And it does appear to have reinvigorated that attack in the middle. But really, he'd have done better staying behind and, as Chris Keeble did after, and looking for an alternative. You know, the answer is not to keep charging trenches. It's too dangerous. You know, you suffer too many casualties. But yes, he earned the Victoria Cross, and now he resides at the cemetery in San Carlos. So that's a little story from the Falklands conflict. I shouldn't call it the Falklands War. It wasn't technically a war, it was a Falklands conflict. Oh, we should just say civilians in Goose Green. They freed several hundred civilians. And just a little matter of trivia, they say that the residents of the Falklands are the most expensively defended people on Earth per capita, because the UK spends well over 100 million a year maintaining its aircraft base and typhoons and stuff there now. And I think there's only about 1,500 people that live on the islands. But yeah, a little bit of an interesting story there.